lots of questions this morning for Martin. So it's time for you to answer the concerns that viewers have. And the first thing is, what are you going to do for people's mortgages? Because you have effectively called a summit.
The Chancellor's called a summit based on me going in saying, look, next spring interest rates are likely to be at their peak along the time that the energy prices get more expensive and the cost of living is there. What can we do to get people over the hump? Now, there is, of course, a question whether it's a hump or it's going to be a continuation. So he said, I think we need a summit. We'll get the big lenders in the room and you in the room. I said, we need the regulator and some others as well. He said, I just want a small meeting because it's more powerful. So I have been collating my own ideas, plus ideas from many mortgage brokers who've been very helpful and some charities. I showed you in the break. I mean, I have pages and pages here that I'll go through. I shall give you a simple example. If somebody is remortgaging, so they're staying in their property, they're not borrowing any more money. Their fix has come to an end and they're looking for a new mortgage on the market. Currently, if you're going to a different lender, it will have to test not if you can afford the mortgage you're applying for, but let's say you're applying for a 4% fix that lasts 5 years, and after the 5 years, that would go up to a 6% standard rate, and they have to add 1% on top to make that 7%. So you're on a 4% mortgage. I hope this isn't too complex. You're on a 4% mortgage that's going to a 6% mortgage. You're applying for another 4% mortgage, but they're testing if you can afford a 7% mortgage. If you can't afford the 7% mortgage, you're going to move on to the 6% mortgage that you probably can't afford when you wanted the cheaper deal. So effectively, people are being told they can't afford a cheaper deal under the way our affordability tests are currently structured.
And therefore they're having to take a more expensive deal.
And therefore they'll have to look at only going to what their own lender is offering them. That's just, and it's a small example to give you the idea that we're trying to lubricate the system to make it easier, looking at making it easier for people to extend and then reduce their term, to go on to temporary interest only, to have a mortgage payment holiday if they need. What can we do to get people through this? And I think it's about getting all the players in the room. I'll be coming up with some suggestions. I saw the Chancellor will, I know the regulator will. And when I've spoken to the lenders about, well, why aren't you doing this? They say, too much paperwork. We can only process a couple of people. The regulator says you don't need to do that. So everybody in the room, we can hopefully say, let's smooth this out. It's not going to affect the housing market, but it may get a few people over the hump.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that affordability test brought in as a response to the subprime, people not being able to afford their mortgages at all crisis? So
it's originally part of the EU credit directive that meant that you had to do a 3% affordability check. That then went. Some would argue it's a Brexit benefit, but there's still a 1% test as part of the regulator. Now, look, affordability tests I'm a big supporter of. If you're trying to get a first-time buyer mortgage, then I think we should make sure you can afford it so you're not going to get yourself in all types of trouble. But if you already have the debt, you are not looking to increase the debt to stop you getting a cheaper rate, which is clearly more affordable than a more expensive rate, because you fail an affordability test, is basically a bit crackers.
Good. There we go. That's given the mortgage lenders a heads up for this afternoon. Your policy's a bit crackers.
It's not theirs, it's, to be honest, it's the regulators.
Yeah, but it means that they can't lend, and we need them to.
Well, we just need to make sure things are as efficient. Flexibility and forbearance is what we're looking at.
Dawn says, could you give us an update, please, on the £200 for rural oil users for home heating?
No. I can't give you an update because the answer is the same as last week. The amount you're going to get has been increased to £200. We still do not know when it will be paid. We have a decent idea of how it will be paid for most, which will be through electricity bills. The fact that we are now into December and this crucial help for those on heating oil and LPG, so they don't have gas, many in rural areas, many who are facing some poverty at the moment, we don't even know when it will be paid. I mean, it should be being paid now, but we don't even know when it will be paid. I will continue to pressurise on it, but I do not have an answer.
That's a shame. Becky is asking, should she change to a variable direct debit rate for gas and electric? Because the readings are cheaper than fixed rate. OK. So the way most people pay direct debit is a fixed monthly direct debit, which means they estimate your usage over a year, they divide it by 12, so you pay the same in the high-use winter months as you do in the lower-use summer months, and it spreads it out. And if that system didn't exist, I would probably be lobbying for it to be brought into place.
So if that's working for you and you're on direct debit, which is the cheapest way to pay, I would stick with it. However, there are many people out there who are fed up that they believe their direct debit is too high and they are already in credit and they're giving meter readings. And so they're going, I don't want to be on direct debit anymore. Well, the first thing I do is I go onto an online direct debit calculator to see if your direct debit is fair, because it might be fair anyway. But if you've gone through that and you've spoken to the company and you're unhappy with your direct debit, switching to variable direct debit, which is available at most but not all big companies, OVO and SSE don't offer it, is the same cheapest rate. Not cheap, cheapest rate is on variable direct debit. What you have to do, you have to have a working smart meter, or you have to give meter readings each month, and then you will pay via direct debit for the amount you use that month, which means in winter, now, you're going to pay a lot more and you'll pay a lot less in summer. That is still far preferable to payment in receipt of bills, which is what most people switch to, that costs roughly 10% more. So if you want to get out of the fixed monthly direct debit, variable direct debit is the best option, but not everyone should be doing it.
Yeah, OK. Dawn says, my son is an apprentice and has a prepayment meter. Still has no vouchers from British Gas. We have called twice and they have broken promises every time. When will he get them?
Well, if you've called, I presume that you've checked that the contact details are right, which is something everybody should check. That's always the first step. It's not the main problem, but let's make sure we get over that hump. Look, we're releasing survey data today of 5,500 respondents, and British Gas are the worst offender on not giving prepayment vouchers. This is for people on traditional prepayment meters. Of the people who reply to us, it's self-selecting, so ignore the number. It's just the fact that because around 30% haven't got them. It isn't on.
No.
It isn't on. It's not good enough. The government have subcontracted this portion of welfare to energy firms, and energy firms aren't delivering. Scottish Power, SSE, not that good. Utilita, whose boss is coming on soon, not that good either. And not the worst, but not that good. Call them, get in touch, make a formal complaint to the Energy Ombudsman. But seriously, my view, I hope, and let's try and get Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Energy, on the programme next week, because the government decided to give this money to energy companies for them to distribute to customers. Yeah. There is clearly a break for the poorest in society, which is those on prepayment meters, especially traditional-style prepayment meters, where a sizable chunk of them haven't got the crucial help at a crucial time when they should. So the government's money, energy companies not giving it, they need to get together and sort it out.
We had Grant Shapps on this programme, and he said that he had written to the energy companies and his minister was going to be meeting the energy bosses this week to do exactly that, because we passed on all of your complaints, you as viewers, to the Business and Energy Department. He took it extremely seriously. He's organised that call. We're still trying to find out if that has happened.
You would wonder why they haven't got service-level agreements in place to make sure that they distribute it and there are fines and money coming back from the companies if they haven't delivered it properly, which is how you'd normally write a contract like this. But I'm not sure whether it was done that way.
No, I don't know, but he took it very seriously when we spoke to him and organised a call as a result. We're following up on that as we speak. Jacqueline, can you ask your supplier to halve the £66 help on your gas and electricity?
Depending on your payment method, the first thing to say is this will the £66 a month comes on your electricity bill. But if you have dual fuel and you're not receiving it by payment into your bank account, in which case you can use it as either way that you want to, you can usually ask it to be allocated to your gas bill if you want it to be in a proportion. That works for most people on most payment types. The main exception, again, is traditional prepayment meters, the vouchers. Most firms have told us, as long as you've got the same supply with them, I mean, if you had two different firms, you can't do it. You've got the same supply with them. Most firms have said they will allow you to allocate your £66 to gas on a prepayment meter, with the exception of British Gas, who doesn't, which is something I'm pushing on. But you'll generally have to get in touch and contact their call centre to do it. It isn't that easy to do. But if you're on direct debit, then, yeah, you should be able to allocate it towards your energy bill, or actually it just tends to come off the total that you're paying in reality. We're
about to go to Alex for a look at the weather, and, you know, you'll know already it's getting colder and this very cold snap is on the horizon, and the numbers behind Alex have gone into the minuses. So Paula asks a really significant, pertinent question. I'm working from home. I'm worried about having the heating on all day. I have health conditions affected by the cold. Will it be cheaper to buy electric heaters and blankets than putting the heating on?
Well, depending on the type of heater that you buy, yes, quite possibly. In fact, what I would suggest, and earlier in the year, one of the most painful things I've asked my team to do is we put together a guide called Heat the Human, Not the Home, which is not a piece of advice. I'm not telling you to do that, but if you are desperate and can't afford to put the heating on, then buying yourself, make sure it's electrically safe, a heated gilet is a very efficient way to heat the body. For example, they're 50 watts, roughly. And it's probably too complicated to say this, but here's what you do. Yeah. Here's how to work out how much it costs you. A kilowatt is 1,000 watts. A kilowatt hour costs roughly 34p. So if it's 50 watts, that's a 20th of that. So it's going to cost you around 1.5p an hour to have a heated gilet on. Or you could have heated insoles or heated gloves. So, yes, you could buy an electric heater, but remember that then the heating is going everywhere. Yeah. But if you're buying something that's totally concentrated on heating you, then you're getting the most efficient use of it. Just make sure they're safe. You're not buying some, a cheap import that doesn't have a safety certificate because it's electrical equipment. Electric blankets at night, heated gilet, heated gloves. If you can't afford to heat your house, look, there can be problems for the house if you don't heat it. But if that's the situation you're in right now, that is a cheaper thing to do than putting your heating on. I'm not advocating it, but you may be in a position where that's the only thing you can afford, which is not good. But
yeah, and can I, before we, again, this is pertinent. Sal says, to keep warm this winter, would you recommend putting the heating on constantly at 18 degrees or have it come on twice a day, which would be the best and cheapest option?
So there is a debate over this. The general advice from the Energy Saving Trust is you have your heating on when you need it and you turn it off when you don't need it. The myth that it is cheaper to have it on all day is false. The slight argument for that is if you have a house that is prone to condensation, then because each time you have to get rid of the condensation and that costs a lot of energy, so turning off and on doesn't work. But in most cases, you turn the heat on when you need it, and you turn it off when you don't need it. Best to do it on a timer and a thermostat. And remember, I know this sounds silly, when it gets cold, and Alex is going to talk about that, people turn their thermostat up. But if it's set at 20 degrees, then it's going to get to 20 degrees. You don't need to turn it up because you're cold now. You're just going to have to wait for it to get up to the temperature. Don't turn it up to 22 because it's not on right now. That's what a thermostat's for. It's to give you the temperature that you've predefined it to be.
The Department of Work and Pensions and the Met Office have said it's too early to decide if the cold weather payment...
So the cold weather payment comes when your area has 7 consecutive days of a mean average temperature below 0 degrees. I was looking at those charts earlier and thought we could be getting close. It actually comes from the Met Office, which is where your data comes from.
And we've got some predicted temperatures over the next 5 days, but it has to be a forecast of 7 days, as I understand it.
It's a forecast over 7 days, but it is a forecast period. It isn't retrospective, it's prospective.
No. So, based on the temperatures that, you're seeing behind me, daytime highs of 3 degrees and then a nighttime low of -10, -11 would actually pull us into that area where some people would qualify for those cold weather payments. However, I think as we get towards Monday and Tuesday next week, it's going to start to, rise a little bit. So we may then come out of that. So I'm not sure if people will qualify for
Yeah, we're on the borderline, aren't we?
We are on the borderline. Of course, we'll be watching this very carefully as we head through the
Anyway, you better freeze us out properly with your weather right now.
I will. Let's have a look.
So, more questions for you, Martin.
Sure.
Sharon Powell, will students get an increase in their maintenance loan to help with their increases in rent?
No, this is something I'm quite concerned about. Obviously, we don't yet know, and we won't hear probably until the middle of next year, what next year, till sort of April, May, what the following September's maintenance loan is. But this year's maintenance loan, the amount that students have to live off, has not gone up anything close to the rate of inflation. And remember that there's a parental contribution in the maintenance loan too, especially in England. It does work slightly differently in other UK nations, which means the amount of maintenance loan your child get depends on what's called your residual income. So the more you earn, the less they get, the more you're expected to fill the gap. Well, you must be, because that's the only reason it's being dropped.
We are standing by to speak to the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, who's at Millbank. So once he is ready, we'll go straight to him. In the meantime, other questions for you, Martin. Anthony says, I've money in 2 separate ISAs with 2 different banks with hardly any interest. Can I transfer them to a savings account that pays more interest?
Yeah, and you can also transfer them to an ISA. The only reason you'd have an ISA at the moment is if you've got a lot of savings, let's say 30, 40, 50,000, because then there's a tax benefit from you from having the money in an ISA. If you've got money in ISAs, you can open a new ISA and, you know, top fixed rate ISA for 1 year pays 3.8%. So you could open a new ISA and then you ask to transfer your old ISAs in so you can get a higher rate. You can earn even more money in the top savings accounts. 2.85% easy access, about 4.5% 1 year fix. And if you don't need the tax advantage of an ISA, just take your money out of the ISA and then put it into the top savings. If you want to keep it in an ISA, you have to do a transfer.
David, why are British Gas not paying the monthly support, £66, £67 payments to their customers? There are thousands of comments on their Facebook page about this.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, in my survey of 5,500 people, British Gas were the worst offender on not giving those on traditional prepayment meters their vouchers. I mean, in practical sense, and I'm not saying this will solve it for anyone, check they've got the right contact details, check you haven't thrown the voucher away, get in contact with them and ask them to resend the voucher if you haven't got it, and ask them how they contacted you in the first place. But clearly there's a problem that's far bigger than just that. And I keep saying it, this is government money. The government needs to sort it out. It has subcontracted this portion of winter welfare to energy firms, and it needs to make sure that they're paying it properly.
Becky says, how much credit is too much? I'm on economy 10. I'm nearly £1,000 in credit. I pay £150 a month. Am I safe to ask for part of that or all of that credit back?
That's too much. £1,000 and £150 a month. Quick process. First thing to do, go and get yourself online. There are a number of direct debit calculators which will tell you what your direct debit should be set at, so you can see how much you should be paying each month and whether that's right or not. Make sure you're giving meter readings if you're not on a smart meter. But my very, very rough rule of thumb, and it is rough, is going into winter, you want to be about a maximum of two to 3 months worth of direct debits in credit. Your direct debit's £150. If we stretch that to the max, that's £450. You're £1,000 in credit. That's too much. Yeah. I think you could safely ask for about 600 quid of that back. And if they don't want to give it you back, ask them to justify why, because in their licence terms and conditions, they have to be fair on the direct debits and fair on the credit.
Jason on Facebook says, will energy prices go down to where they were before fuel hasn't?
Certainly not in the short term. I mean, currently, and doing this on typical bills, I know there's no such thing, but let's do it because it's the easiest way to explain. We're currently at £2,500 for somebody on direct debit. Next April, the energy price guarantee is going up to £3,000. It will stay at £3,000 for a year unless underlying prices come down, so the price cap drops and is cheaper. We're not seeing signs of that yet, maybe towards the end of 2023. But I was in a meeting with Ofgem yesterday. I meet with the energy suppliers and with energy market people, and everything I'm hearing, I don't think we'll ever go back to the £800 being a typical bill.
Wow.
If things were to go really right, we might get down to £1,500, but I think we're a few years away from seeing anything like that. The ending of the conflict in Ukraine
is crucial.
Is crucial.